All right, so welcome everybody. I'm Rabbi Micah Streifer, and on behalf of La Asok, I want to welcome you to this latest installment of our Social Justice in Our Texts series. Today we'll be learning from Berg Powers about the Torah of reparations, a very interesting topic. First, before we jump in, I want to acknowledge the partner organizations and congregations that have been part of making this program happen. I'm going to list them all. Many of you are part of one or more of these organizations, and they are A Wider Bridge, Amud, the Jews of the Jews of Color Torah Academy, CCAR Press, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, Central Synagogue, Congregation B'nai Israel of Little Rock, Arkansas, Congregation Sharei Tzedek in East Lansing, Michigan, Congregation Shir Chadash of the Hudson Valley, Keshet, the Kirva Institute, the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, the Union for Reform Judaism, Temple B'nai Or in Morristown, New Jersey, Temple Judea in Coral Gables, Florida, Temple Shalom in Scotch Plains, New Jersey, Tzedek Blocks, and Women of Reform Judaism. I hope you've got all that because there will be a test afterwards. I'm really excited and proud and grateful to all of these co-sponsoring organizations who are working with La Asok to make this social justice in our texts series happen. I also want to thank those of you who donated to make this series possible, which is many of you who are in the room with us today. If you are interested in making a donation to La Asok to ensure that we can continue to create inclusive, progressive Jewish learning, I'll drop into the chat in a few minutes the directions on how to do that. A couple of quick technical notes, and then we're going to begin our topic. First of all, we are on Zoom, so we're going to ask you to stay muted during most of the conversation. We all know what happens when we all make background noise. But we do intend this to be interactive, so if you have comments or thoughts to share, please feel free to drop them into the chat or to raise your hand electronically, which you can do in React at the bottom of your screen. As I said before, I would invite you to have your camera on if you feel comfortable. I'll also just mention that all comments in the chat do need to be pertinent to the topic at hand. Any comments that are not about what we're talking about, we're going to have to delete, and I appreciate your understanding as these things can be challenging to manage with a large group. Finally, I don't know if this is going to be pertinent today, Jordan, you can let me know. If you are willing to read a text off the screen, just say so in the chat, and then either Jordan or I can call on you when the time comes. He's giving me a thumbs up, so yes, please let us know if you'd like to read. Okay, with no further ado, I want to introduce our speaker, and then we're going to join in the blessing for study, and then we'll begin this discussion. I'm excited to welcome Berg Powers. He is a PhD student at the Brandeis University Heller School's Institute for Economic and Racial Equity and a political and organizational consultant based in Worcester, Massachusetts. He previously served for 13 years as executive director of Mass Alliance, where he united a diverse coalition of 29 advocacy and political organizations into a powerful force for justice in Massachusetts and trained thousands of organizers nationwide in grassroots strategy, messaging, and political power. Jordan now advises national organizations on executive leadership, organizing, and integrating DEI into institutional practice, with particular focus on supporting Jews of color and the broader Jewish nonprofit sector. He serves as a zoning board commissioner for the City of Worcester and sits on numerous civic and Jewish justice boards, including the Committee for Social Action of the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism, which I mention in particular because it's one of the partners for this learning series. Also, a quick reminder that there will be a follow-up discussion to this session led by Rabbi Emily Lozman-Ostrov on this Thursday at 7 p.m. After the session, I will send out the recording for this session, and that email will include the link and the information for the follow-up discussion if you want to come and talk further about what we learned today. Now, let me share my screen and let's join together in the blessing for study. If you would like to join us in reciting this blessing, I would invite you to unmute at this time, and we'll say words together. Please join me. Baruch atah
אתה
Adonai
אדוני
Eloheinu melech
אלוהינו
haolam,
מלך העולם,
asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav
אותותיו ציוונו
la'asot
לעשות
divrei Torah.
תורה.
Which means in Hebrew, blessed is the eternal source of the universe, whose commandments, whose mitzvot, bring us holiness, and who commands us to immerse, to engage in words of Torah. Now, if everyone can please remute, I'll turn things over to Jordan Berg Powers. Jordan, take it away.
Thank you so much. It's always weird to hear your own bio, and it's lovely. It's a real honor to be here and to discuss something that I'm really excited to talk to you all about, which is reparations in the Torah, and also just to see so many of you here. So thank you, everyone, for being here and for joining this conversation. So again, let me just share my screen really quickly, and we'll get into it. All right. So we're going to talk about reparations, slavery, justice, and repair, and Afro-pessimism, which I'm always excited to talk about. I don't need to do my bio since you all just lovingly did it. So I'll just move along, but I'll just say I've been really honored to work later in my career in the Jewish community, and so this has been a real pleasure to be here today and to be asked to do this. Okay, so you all joined the call, but most of you probably know the story of reparations in the Torah. So tell me about it. If you're willing to come off mute or you want to put it into the chat, I would love to, yeah, tell me all about it. Yes, Amalia, did I say that correctly? Oh, let me ask you to unmute.
When a slave is released after 7 years, he should not leave empty-handed. They should give him enough to support himself, to have a roof over his head and something to wear. לא תשלחנו ריקם, that's the verse in Hebrew. So don't send him empty-handed.
Yep. I didn't pull that one. I can actually talk about why if people are curious and talk a little bit more, but that's a really good one. Yes, exactly. Cannot leave empty-handed. Barry, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking of the Israelites requesting silver and gold and whatnot from the Egyptians and before they left and stripping the Egyptians.
Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly it. That's, or at least that's the two. So there are two big places are one that Amalia rightly pointed out, which is that there is a commandment that if you have a Jewish slave, if you brought a Jewish person into slavery, that they cannot leave empty-handed. There's sort of competition about who that applies to, but basically the slaves cannot leave empty-handed. And the other is this really interesting thing that happens that's actually a couple of times that's listed in the Torah, and especially coming up literally in the next week, not this coming Saturday, but the Saturday after, or maybe Saturday after that. So Shabbat after that, right? So we're into this place where we're talking about these pieces, and it's this really weird thing. And I can tell you the first time I was much older, and I remember I was in shul, and I was like, what is happening here? What is going on? Is this a thing for reparations? So just really quickly, we'll put it in the chat as well, and so that people can sort of access it lots of different ways for easy to read. But if somebody would like to read, you can just read the English, this piece here, especially the last two verses in this, that would be great. Yes, Lori, go ahead.
Just the last two verses?
The last two verses would be great.
And I will dispose the Egyptians favorably toward this people, so that when you go, you will not go away empty-handed. Each woman shall borrow from her neighbor, and the lodger in her house, objects of silver and gold and clothing, and you shall put these on your sons and daughters, thus stripping the Egyptians.
Yeah, really interesting. We're going to talk about this. What does it mean to borrow? What does it mean to like dispose the Egyptians favorably? What are the pieces to that? Why are we encountering this? And it's just a strange piece to this story, right? So this is This is actually not when it happens. This is God reassuring Moses about what's going to go on. So this is actually earlier. So even before, right? Even before there is the plagues, even before things, he's in the front of the burning bush, and he's like, I don't know if I should go do this thing. And God is like, not only are we going to do all these things, but I'm also going to give the people, they're going to borrow silver and gold, right? Like we're going to give them silver and gold. Okay, this is the other piece that I will highlight. Um, if somebody want to come off and read these pieces, I would be greatly appreciated. These
I'll be
portions.
happy to.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls wrapped in their cloaks upon their shoulders. The Israelites had done Moses' bidding and borrowed from the Egyptians objects of silver and gold and clothing. And Adonai had disposed the Egyptians favorably toward the people, and they let them have their request. Thus, they stripped the Egyptians.
Thank you very much, Fred. This is a clear case of some form of reparations, right? This is a clear case, and it's not Moses commanding it. It's not Pharaoh agreeing to it. It's God changing Egyptians' minds to make sure that the Israelites, as they leave Mitzrayim, have silver and gold. Right? And it's not God told them and they commanded and they did it, or there was more plagues and it happened. God is changing the minds of Egyptians to have them be like, oh, they're going to borrow the silver and gold. Yes, Malia, go ahead. Oh, you're muted again.
I don't like it. They
Okay.
took something from the Egyptians that have a great value, and it says they borrowed vayish'alu, but means that you plan to return it. And besides, it's just, I don't know, I don't see it as reparation. Somebody took more, somebody took less. I don't like it.
Okay, great. Great. You're in my next slide where we talk about it. Perfect. Lori, go ahead.
I keep wondering about the word to dispose favorably. And maskima itach, Amalia. But right, so that's a whole question of lishloach, lishoel, to request or something, right, to borrow. But what is it that Adonai disposes of the Egyptians favorably? Like, I'm unclear of that one. And if that's not where you want to focus, Jordan, you can leave it alone.
No, that is literally where I want to focus. You're like in my next couple of slides. It's perfect. I'm totally fascinated with this idea of what does it mean to peace. What's the other piece? Why are they borrowing? What is happening? What is Moses' request of Pharaoh in this story? Like what's this whole thing? It's not to free the slaves. What is he trying to do?
Oh, he wants them, but he does. He wants him to let them go, right?
No. Abby, go ahead.
Okay.
What he tells Pharaoh is they're going to go worship God and come back.
Yeah.
He does. Of course, that's not true. It's bullshit, but excuse me. But that's what he tells Pharaoh. So if they go to their neighbor and say, can I borrow your gold thingamajig to go worship my God and then bring it back? The Egyptians presumably believed that.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? Pharaoh says on the way out, like after he's lost his firstborn son, say a prayer for me. Pharaoh asked Moses to say a prayer for him because they're going out to pray. Yeah, David, go ahead. You're muted. No worries.
Okay. I find it very concerning to use this as a basis for the justice that we would seek through some form of reparations. Because in this telling, the Israelites are tricking people into thinking that they're just lending them something and then abscond with it and then admit in their own scripture that we stripped it from you. And the idea of reparations, as I've always understood it, is that this is a matter of doing justice to people to whom an injustice was done. And if we're going to expect that thing to stick societally over time, everyone has to have buy-in. And here, if you're not in the tribe of Israel, you don't need to have any buy-in whatsoever. So this is problematic, I think. I would not use it to try to convince people that under Scripture reparations are appropriate, because the way it is done here is incredibly dishonest and doesn't create a wider community.
So we're gonna sit with this. I love this conversation that's happening. I'm gonna go Joy and Rabbi Micah, and then I'm sorry, Bob, I'm gonna send people into breakouts because we're gonna talk about it. You're gonna talk about it together. I'm gonna give you some prepping beforehand. But go ahead, Joy.
I think the problem is we are all seeing this as deceitful, and nobody likes to feel that they were deceitful. We treasure the fact that they were able to get out of Egypt, but not deceitful. It should have been in a more honest manner. I also have a really big issue calling this a reparation. This is not a reparation. I'm sorry. Even if God disposed them favorably, this is not a reparation.
Okay. I love you're like not on board. Great. Let's talk about it some more. Rabbi Micah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to push back a little bit on what David said, and maybe Joy as well, that the last verse suggests that the Egyptians changed their minds in some way. Now, it has God sort of, I said in the chat, God, this is like God as puppet master, right? God is pulling the strings, hardening Pharaoh's heart, causing the Egyptians to be disposed favorably. But I don't know about any of you, but I don't believe in a supernatural God that changes people's minds. If God here represents some kind of justice, then maybe what we're reading about here is actually that the Egyptians came to understand the justice of giving this stuff, this reparations or whatever it was, to the Israelites. I understand the Torah doesn't exactly say it in those words, but I think you could read it as the Egyptians coming to understand that this is a just thing that they've done because God changed their minds, such as it is.
So I'm sorry. I encourage you, Bob, to come. I'll call you first when we come back. I want to make sure we're staying on track. So we're gonna go into some breakouts. But I want in the breakouts to think about all these things. To think these are all really rich. What does it mean for Hashem to influence the Egyptians? What does it mean? What's going on? No one talked about this, but like, what are the Egyptians thinking about for 430 years where they have free labor? Do they not know what's going on? Do they not think somebody should get something in return? Do people really believe that they're going out to pray for 3 days and they're going to come back? Right? Like there's so much here that I think I think is, for me, instructive on how we today think about these things. And how much people know and don't know and understand and don't understand. And there's so much rich there for us to tell us. And already rich, this conversation is fantastic. So we're going to go into some breakouts for exactly 15 minutes. And then we'll come back and discuss a little bit more.
All right, I'm creating 18 breakout rooms, which means there should be about 4 people in each breakout room. And Jordan, I hope this is okay. I just put the questions into the chat.
Perfect.
So that people can
and these don't
them.
have to be the questions you discussed. They're just some suggestions, but have a conversation. Yeah.
All right, everybody. We'll see you in 15 minutes.
I want to give, because I cut Bob off, I wanted to give Bob a chance to, if you'd like to speak. You had your hand nicely raised, and I feel bad, but I wanted to get people in on time. So if you want to just report back what you were thinking or report back to the room, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I just wanted to go back and just say that I really had an agreement with Right. It wasn't that God changed anybody's mind. I think God just imbued into the people that there's some value to justice. Justice should exist. I mean, if you live in a situation where you believe that things are just the way they are, then there's no justice. It's just, whatever might happen to me today is what happened to me today. And it could be good, it could be bad. It has to do with, like, I'm sure they would be thinking luck. And so this whole idea then of, this, what's going to happen, it'd be so shocking. I said to the group that I was a member of, uh, you know, the Egyptians don't know what's going to happen to them now that everybody's left, that you did a lot of the major work. So are they going to put me, those people in charge? Are they going to put me in charge of bricks without straw? And they also would be like, okay, you have your freedom, go, be happy and, worship your God. So, it'd be real chaotic, I would think. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience. I'm sure great conversations, and I want to say that there's no right answer to any of these things. But I'm gonna give you my opinion about it, and hopefully, it'll lead to some more discussion. So, let me just share. Okay. So this is such a fascinating story in here. This is such a fascinating part of our Torah. I think a lot about this Torah portion. I would say that this is very much what if you're interested, it's very much what my dissertation is about. It's about this sort of wrestling with how do we think about sort of justice and repair and policy and pulling all of these together in a world where people rightly said, like, is it right? Do people even notice? Do they really know what's going on? Are there ways that we can make amends? And so I would argue that this piece is also struggling with two truths that I believe to be true, which is one, that you really cannot move forward without doing some sort of repair. You need to do some sort of amends, some sort of reparation, some sort of fix to the harm that you've done, and that that people are intrinsically opposed to going back and doing that. That, like, as a society, it is nearly impossible to get people on board, and that you really have to change people's hearts and minds. You can't tell them to do it. You can't use logic to do it. You can't even use, like, right or wrong to do it. You really have to change their minds at a really core level to get them to understand the harm that was done and the need for them and their repair to move forward. So I really struggle with this. I think both are true. Jerry, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep moving because I'm almost out of time, but I'll try to get some more comments at the end. I just want to move through really quickly. So I struggle with these things, and I want to pull out. Grace Gleason put a really great piece on Sephora about reparations in the Torah that I pulled some of these pieces from, and she pulled this great piece from Tanisha Coates' book about reparations, a case for reparations, and in it. I won't read it, but essentially what you get is that in the 1950s, when West Germany paid reparations to the Jewish state and to Jews, entitled Jews, for reparations, that it was actually very unpopular. That largely people didn't want to do it. We're talking a few years after the Holocaust, right? People are not unaware of what happened, and they're not unaware of what happened in their society, and they're still like, I don't want to, like, what do we owe these people? And you still get people sort of blaming Jewish people for what happened, not wanting to put in, right? It wasn't a popular piece. And you had this idea that, like, there were Germans who were just doing the right thing for their fatherland, and, like, there were these bad people who did the bad things, and not really getting at the way in which society as a whole made the Holocaust possible, and therefore the societal cost that it took that you needed to do repair. So this is a really interesting, and this is a foundational belief for myself as well, that it's really difficult to get people on board with this big idea of having to do some form of repair and some form of reparations and some form of understanding of the depth of the cause. And I think about this in terms of there's 430 years, according to the Torah, of Israelite enslavement in Egypt. What does it take to create a society where people are building things for you for free? That you haven't conquered them, you haven't done anything. They just happen to they're born into it. There's other human beings are born into it, other humans, and they can never leave it. They can never change it. They will always be in a subservient role to you. 430 years of it. There's a whole society built around this one idea that Israelites, that Jews should be subservient to the Egyptian people, right? That's how the society is oriented. And so to just say, like, oh, well, they should just like be able to leave. They should be like, we should go and you should give us, and it's like not like that's actually not possible. There's not a world where people can reorient themselves to seeing Israelites and Jews as people, as willing, as equals, as worthy of humanity, as worthy of being free, right? That it's just it's like that you can't even get to that place. And so for me, what the text is screaming is that God had to intervene a little to try to get people even to the idea that they should be allowed to like leave and do and what they need to do. And you can think about that however you want. Certainly disagree. I would love that. It would be the most Jewish response. But that's the way I read it. And I come from my orientation of Afro-pessimism. Does anybody know what Afro-pessimism is? Does anybody? You put it in the chat. I won't ask you to come up with it. Yes, somebody said Holocaust survivors were also not unanimous. There was actually riots in Israel opposed to taking money from Germany after the Israeli state. So it was not universal. It was very contentious. Certainly not I would argue that everybody gets something out of this idea of well, Bob, let's talk about this a little bit more. Actually, that's a good part. Good question, Bob Hammer. I'll tease that out a little bit more because I have a more complex thoughts about that. Okay, so Afro-pessimism is the idea is a strand of critical race theory, and it is this idea that it's really hard to tackle this thing that happened in the Americas. That like, what does it take to take people and collapse them into a place where they no longer have history? They no longer have language. They might have some strands of culture, but they've lost their immediate culture, their immediate ability to tell the story of who they are and where they come from. Like, how much violence and horror does it take to replicate that? And then to tell a society that people who can, like, in the Torah, right, like, people are slaves and they get let go a certain amount of time, at least Jews to Jews. It's sort of, again, more complicated, but like that we let the people, you can't be born into it and never free, or they weren't conquered. They fought them, right? And then they take people as prisoners. Like, these are people who you are not fighting, and they can never be free for hundreds of years. They're born into this cycle of servitude, and that the whole society is oriented around this idea. So much so that you create a whole sector of other people, whiteness, which is to be an antithesis of not black, not this thing, these people who cannot be ever free or ever equal. What does it take to create that society? Afro-pessimism is trying to tackle with that issue, and that it took, if you take sort of 1619 to 1964, 345 years. I might argue it might take to 430 years to actually have the sort of anti-Black equality that I would envision for this country and for the world. So Afro-pessimism says that to create that society, to create that orientation, it has to be so bad that we really can't actually understand the depth of how bad it is, and how much violence and horror it took to create the society, and how much everybody needs to be bought into it. That it doesn't matter if you own slaves, it doesn't matter that whether or not you sort of like financially benefit, that like to even fight a war to keep it in place, that you have to be bought in because you believe there's something in it for you, that this orientation is so into our society that we have really not even scratched the surface of what it will take to undo it. And you get some really interesting things. W. Du Bois, sort of great historian of Black history, creates the field of sociology. And in one of his first books, he talks about the reaction to freed slaves in the 1860s. And within 2 years, you're getting think pieces in the New York Times and other pieces questioning why Black people aren't equal. Why are they so prone to violence, so unable to be free citizens, equal citizens of America? 2 years after the end of the Civil War, they're already writing these pieces. And so we're getting that same sort of thing of like no ability to both sort of like self-reflect and also no desire to really change the fundamentals of how we got where we are, because there's this idea that it's like just surface, like, oh, there's just some justice, we'll just add a little justice, we'll free them, and it'll be fine. It'll be okay. And not tackling, like, how do we create a society where such inhumanity even exists? And can you undo it simply by just changing some laws? So that is Afro-pessimism at its core. It's this idea through that anti-Blackness is the way that our society is ordered. That it is to understand the Americas, but really to understand any place in the world, you need to understand the role of a fundamental other, a lower class, a people that will always be there to tell society how to order itself. That no matter where you are, at least you're not that. At least you're not Black. That worry, that fear, that placement, that positionality of Black people as the permanent other, the permanent underclass, the permanent will never be, the permanent we're not worthy of, that isn't just like a hatred. That's actually a way to create order and to allow people to continue to sort of be exploited, to allow people to sort of be okay with their place, even though they're generally unhappy with their place, because at least they're not that, at least they're not there. That is what Afro-pessimism believes about the world, that it is so deep that it literally orders our society even to this day, and that just freeing people or changing some laws doesn't change that orientation, doesn't change the fundamentals, because we still think that at our core as a society. Obviously, individuals don't believe that. There's lots of people who don't believe that. There's lots of people who push back about that at all times, at all places, right? There's never a time, whenever you have oppression, there are always people who are fighting. I am sure there were Egyptians fighting the oppression of Israelites. I am sure of that. That's always been true, but that it's fundamentally apart. And that the Black slave, the void site of non-capacity, it makes whiteness possible. It's this idea of like, there's this thing that you can create. It goes further. It tackles this idea. Afro-pessimism says that fundamentally, the sort of violence, especially violence of Black death, isn't sort of like a mistake, like, oh, they accidentally killed a Black person, or they went too far, or they're just sort of like, oh, the system's a little out of whack. That actually, that is how, that violence is critical to reminding people that this is the way it is and should always be. That this is fundamentally who we are. And it's essential to the way the world works, to the way the world, and especially America's work. That is its core. And so you get this idea that, and this is a picture from people celebrating a lynching, from the museum that looks over, that did some photographs and collected stories about this. And essentially, I won't get into this quote, but essentially this idea that like it is the desire, the need for violence and persistent poverty, persistent othering, persistent non-full citizenship is required for the permanent sort of way our society works, where some people are benefiting so much and other people continue to struggle, that at least they'll never be that. So when the idea is like, did Egyptians benefit? Yes, because they were not Israelites. That placement, that place to always be above somebody else, is worth destroying other things in the process, that you are willing to give up even your own benefit to always be atop someone else for you to never fall below. This is best exemplified by Lee Atwater. If you don't know Lee Atwater is the person who created the Southern strategy, famously for came out of Nixon, went into Reagan. He was the person who trained Karl Rove, right? And then we sort of get Trump out of that. So he's the sort of original person who thinks these things. And on his deathbed, he wants to do amends. He feels really bad about what he's done, and he's apologizing. He's apologizing for it. But he essentially says this thing that is true about, which I won't read, but that essentially, like, the way we orient, that we pulled in these old ideas to keep society, to keep power, because it worked. It worked to remind people, to keep people in their certain place, to be in a certain place. So when to go back to this original question, and I'll sort of wrap up from there, to go back to this question of, like, what is this text trying to tell us? For me, what is happening here is the recognition that to allow a people that you have subjugated, that you have allowed to suffer, to torture, to murder, to do all the horrible things that it takes to orient the society, to allow that to happen around you, let alone to do it yourself. There's so many broken things in humanity. There's so much of humanity that needs to be broken that it takes a certain type of intervention that isn't just simply what's right or wrong, going together, that you need to really change how we think about what happened and how we think about each other, and reorient the society as a whole towards seeing each other as truly full, truly human, truly possible. And maybe that's what happened. Maybe that's the intervention here. Or maybe it was quick, and guys like, I don't have time for that. These people are never going to get around. We're just going to shortchange it. I don't know the answer to that question. I think we should debate it. It'd be lovely to continue the conversation. But I think that that's really the core for me of the question of reparations and the struggle with this piece, is that it's not enough to be like, hey, free my people. It's really wrong that they're enslaved, and you should pay us for all this free labor. That's not going to cut. That's not enough. You cannot do that. That even the sight of 10 plagues cannot undo what the Egyptian society is. We don't even have 10 plagues. How are we going to undo it? And that's our charge. That to me is the work that needs to get done. So that is skipping ahead to the end here. Just really quickly, I have a whole other teaching about Afro-pessimism and what to teach about anti-Semitism. I see some conversations. I'd love to have that conversation. I have lots of thoughts about it. I think we're approaching it really wrong. So I have lots of things about those pieces that I won't go into. The things I want to leave us with are the RAC has thankfully put together some work on a reparations toolkit. I love this toolkit. I did not work on it, but I think it's fantastic. And so I think people, if you are associated with the RAC, I would encourage you to use it. Even if you're not, I think it's a really great resource to think about pushing the reparations bill. But I always leave people with the thing that I think is most important, and then we'll close up for some questions and conversation. Is I think when people ask me, well, if it's so deep and it's so hard to change, how do you change it? And to me, is you change culture. You change culture. What we know is that it's not enough to change laws. It's not enough to reason with people in terms of using their brain. We need to bring in their soul, their hearts. I think that's also what this piece is, what this Torah is talking about. We need to, and the best way to do that is through art, through culture. That's actually the way we make change. Is through making people laugh, making people feel, making people understand these stories as more than just a bunch of people that things happen to, but individuals. And that the harm of it is still harming all of us, even to this day. That the orienting around anti-Blackness today is harming us today. It is the easiest fault line. When Russia wants to attack us, it attacks us on race because it's the easiest thing to attack us on. It's our clearest fault line. So to fix America, to fix us, we need to really tackle with that and see each other as fully human and break down these big things of anti-Blackness. That to me is actually the way that will sort of, it's like harming us even today. And so we really need a full repair of the harm that was done. And this is one step to do so, of many, totally. All right.
Jordan, if I can just interject,
Yeah, please.
I didn't do this on purpose, but this coming Thursday at our weekly Tikva through text, which is our half-hour study group where we study some Jewish text that's hopeful in some way, I'm going to be teaching, and we're going to be studying the Mishnah from Tractate Sanhedrin that explores what it is to be human, which is where that famous quote that says, "If you save a single life, you have saved the world," comes from. So I think that it dovetails nicely with what you're talking about, just in terms of how Judaism teaches us to see human beings as human beings. And I just dropped into the chat if you want to sign up. That one's totally free. It's half an hour on Thursday at noon Eastern. If you want to join us for that, just to, as a sort of a follow-up to this conversation that we're having, I would love for any of you to join us.
Great. Thank you. That's perfect. I'll take one or two comments, and then we should. Jerry, go ahead, and then we'll go from there. We'll close
Thank
out.
you. This has been wonderful and greatly informative. In the countries over the last 20, 50 years that have had relatively successful truth and reconciliation processes, what got those processes to work well? I don't know that any of them have truly resolved the problems. I don't know enough about it. But we at least have some more contemporary examples that perhaps we can work from.
Yeah, I'll leave that to the group. I think I actually studied in South Africa, so I know I was there not far after apartheid, so I know about the Truth and Reconciliation for apartheid. I don't know about the other places. I know that they've occurred, so I can talk about the apartheid one. I will say for that, I think there's lots of complaints. There were complaints at the time that no one was quote unquote held responsible, that people could, up to a certain point, not totally, sort of tell their story. But I think the ability to sort of see it in the face and have to face it. But I think the things that made it work were there was a clear process with clear rules and people willing to enforce the sort of morality of it, to talk about the morality of it. So you have the sort of Nelson Mandela's and Desmond Tutu's and folks who were talking about why we needed it to move forward together, and why everybody's self-interest to move forward in a way, but not to not talk about what happened. So that's my understanding. I feel like I have like 2 minutes, so I don't want to dive too much into it, but I'd say that's what I took away from it, among many other things, having been right after. But yeah.
So
Okay.
I think we have to wrap up because we are
We
just
do have to
about
wrap
at
up,
our
yeah.
time. So let me say a huge thank you to Jordan Berg Powers. This was so interesting and informative and so multi-layered, and I feel like we have barely scratched the surface on this important conversation. So thank you to Jordan. Thank you to all of you for being here, for participating in this conversation. Our next session in this social justice in our text series is coming up in only a few weeks. It's February 2nd with Rabbi Glenn Jacob, and we'll be shifting topics. We'll be talking about Jewish responses to climate change as we make our way through this series on all kinds of different social justice topics. A reminder as well that on Thursday evening, Rabbi Emily Lozman Ostrov will be leading a follow-up discussion to this session. You'll get information about that, as well as that Tikva through text, which is Thursday at noon Eastern, that I'll be leading, which is not directly related to this, but is related to what it means to see people as human beings. And with that, let me say thank you again to Jordan. Thank you to all of our partners for making this possible. And thank you to all of you for being here and for being part of this conversation. Take care, everyone.